moving higher in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving higher, time and time again. Through the years you'll find us here. Moving higher.
Hello and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast Markets with Shawn Hackett. Shawn is a financial advisor with Hackett Financial in Boca Raton, Florida. And this edition of the Moving Iron Podcast is brought to you by Dawson Tire and Wheel, your premier tire and wheel provider in North America, helping people grow. Tractor Zoom, delivering insights, and Dry Shod Boots, the official work boot of the Moving Iron Podcast. Shawn, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good, Mr. Casey. Doing really good. Despite the news, I'm doing really good down here.
It's a zombie apocalypse in Florida, from what I understand.
I was going to bring a picture of a skeleton, but I thought that's not a good idea.
Yeah, well, people believe you then. I mean, like, holy crap. Listen to the news. It sounds like Florida is just on death's doorstep everywhere you go. So
I can tell you life is good down here. It really is. It's good. So.
It's crazy what the news reports, isn't it?
It is. And our markets are driven by it, as you know. So that's what we have to – that's the state of affairs right now, and that's what we have to focus on. So.
Yep, absolutely. So on Wednesday, speaking of the economy, the Fed came out with their monetary program for the upcoming quarter here, and basically painted a very rosy picture of the economy. It was, they kind of told everything. There's no real surprises there, and everybody knew kind of where we were at, what was going on. There's still a lot of hangover left over from the coronavirus shutdown that we had in March, and I guess so they're keeping interest rates at near zero. So money's still cheap out there to move stuff, but they're starting to see some stagnation in the market. So I guess what was your reaction to what the Fed came out with, and what is your thoughts on the how it's going to affect the markets? I guess when you looked at the stock market yesterday, it had a dip, but it came right back. So there's not a lot of fear there.
Well, I mean, I think you really want to look at the U.S. dollar in terms of how the market really thinks of the Federal Reserve policies. You know, the dollar has been kind of crashing here, at least the last couple of weeks, maybe even three. And I think, look, the Federal Reserve Chairman is always trying to strike a delicate balance, right?
Right.
He wants to say things are looking good, but he wants to also say they're not that good that he's willing to tighten monetary policy. So what he wants to say is, I'm going to stay loose, but things look good. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what he said yesterday. And the dollar is reacting in a manner that suggests that the money printing pumps are going to stay on for the foreseeable future. And as is government spending, another $1 to $2 trillion relief packages being discussed again. And so that money ain't going to come from me and you. That money's going to come from the Federal Reserve printing it and giving it to them. That's the only way that money gets spent. So with that in mind, a weaker dollar intermediate term is always good for ag markets. It doesn't have to be right away, but we haven't had a weaker dollar environment or a weaker dollar trend in a very long time. Yeah. So to me, despite the fact that I'm not sure all this crazy spending and printing is good in the long run, it is good for the dollar to go down, and that is good for ag in the short run. So
okay, so let me talk about this a minute. So I've read some articles and listened to some various radio shows and stuff, podcasts and those kind of things that I listen to, and we're talking about the dollar, contracting a little bit, and we're starting to see some movement there that we haven't seen in a while. I've heard numbers between 70 and 90% of the world's economies are in some level of contraction, some greater than others. But really, as the dollar contracts, so does everybody else. So we're still kind of on the same playing field, I guess. Talk about that a little bit and what you see there and how that is affecting what we see for exports in the U.S.
Well, remember, if you're spending money you do not have, throughout history, if you spend money you do not have, and you are printing the money to spend that money, so rolling back here a little bit, the Federal Reserve is also involved in what they call interest rate management. That means that they're going to control long-term and short-term interest rates to prevent them from going higher. So that policy, which was done in the late 1940s, early 1950s, and everyone else is doing it, means that if you spend money and print the money, and you don't allow interest rates to go up, the only way that the market adjust for that is for a weaker currency. But you're correct. If everyone's doing it, then the overall level of currency is falling, right? But the difference is the U.S. is doing it on such a massive scale beyond what anyone else is doing. It's dollar bearish, meaning everyone is doing it, but we're doing it on a scale that no one else could get away with. We only get away with it because we have the reserve currency, right?
Right.
So it's such a massively larger than everybody else. It's dollar bearish, even though the other currencies are bearish. We're more bearish right now, so we're losing ground on most other currencies, and that differential is positive for U.S.-based ag prices in the long run. Has always been that way. So
okay. All right, so let's jump over and take a look at what's happened in the markets here this week. Corn and soybeans both have done nothing but go down. I don't know if they start up, kind of make their way up a little bit, but they finish. They lose what they've gained plus some towards the end of the day. And I think yesterday it closed at like 317 the front month or something like that. I don't have it in front of me here, but it's right around there. And so we're kind of back to where we were. We've officially given back everything that we gained. That run up to 350 that we saw about 3 weeks ago. So there's a lot of bearish news out there about, we're going to have a massive crop. It's going to be 184 average bushel an acre on that. And soybeans are kind of in the same boat. There's going to be this massive crop. I don't know. It seems to me like the weather forecast does not necessarily support that, but I'm not an agronomist either. So I guess what's your thoughts on that? And where do you see corn going?
Well, the market did not like what the USDA said Monday night when they increased the crop ratings on corn by 3, and I guess they increased the soybean ratings by 3 or 2 or something like that. So the market viewed that, and especially for corn, and said, "Well, that's it. The crop's made. It's done. We're done." If all one had to do was take crop ratings to determine crop yields, it'd be the easiest thing in the world to figure out. We wouldn't even need the USDA to tell us, right? But Of course, crop ratings do not correlate extremely well with yields. They're a general barometer, but what we have been trying to discuss in our reports is that in years when we have extremely above average temperatures, especially at night, the crop looks great because humid nights usually means you have some thunder shower activities, and the crop looks great. So we go back to 2010, which was the last year we really had a year where we had what I'd call scattered rainfall, but extremely warm temperatures at night. The ratings back in 2010 were exactly the same as they are today during the same week last time. Crop looked great. Everyone thought we had a record crop yield. And then from the August yield report that the USDA came out with to the October, they dropped yields by 11 bushel to the acre because harvest yields were not coming in as expected. We see the same thing happening. We see the market, unfortunately, trading great crop conditions, assuming all is well, but they've not identified this extremely warm, well above normal, hot, warm night and the issue to pollination. And so we think there's going to be a rude awakening for that. But until crop yields off the combine start to show disappointment, which we really won't get that until late August, the market is free to trade. The crop's been made, and that's kind of where we're at. So I also think we're testing the lows, as you said, from June. I don't think we go marginally below here right now, Casey. I think we could just chop sideways while the market just waits for harvest to begin. But if we believe that we could see a significant decline in yields from August to October based upon this hot, warm night, failed pollination kind of concept that we see from time to time. And so with that being said, then the market is grossly mispricing corn, if that's true. So that's where we think that. We think we're near a low, but we don't think that we can get a lot of upside going until we get enough harvest results, which probably will be late August. We're thinking the corn market can start to poke its head back up again after going sideways, maybe into mid-late August. That's where we see corn, right? Soybeans a little different. If August is good weather, soybeans could be a big crop. We don't know yet. We're just getting started, but it does look like they're backing off some of the heat in August. It looks like The scattered rainfall will continue to be there. So also, soybeans could be in really good shape. It's just too early to know. We don't have a strong indication right now on crop yields for soybeans. We have a very good indication for corn, and we think we're right about that. So,
all right. So last night I had the pleasure of getting your latest article come through on special natural cycle weather report, and I kind of breezed through the executive summary that you have there on the front page, and I haven't had a chance to click through and read the actual report that you have. But let's talk about that for a little bit here. So you mentioned the Gleesberg and the Yoshimura cycle and how they pertain to the global sea surface temperatures and global air temperatures, and how that's going to start affecting what we see happening out there as far as the weather goes, plus going into a grand solar minimum that you've talked about on here quite a bit, starting in 2021. There's some weather coming, some changes in our weather that are going to have a bigger effect on what we see happen than anything that we see right now. So I guess let's kind of breeze through that a little bit.
We've been a student and a study of weather our whole life. I mean, it's been a passion of ours, and we look back at thousands of years of ice core data and tree ring data and historical written documents, and we've noticed that the natural state of climate is that it's always changing. That is to say that the normal state of the climate is it's never stable. It's always changing. So is it warming? Is it cooling? Is it more floods, more droughts? Is it more extreme weather volatility, less weather volatility? And this has been going on for hundreds and thousands of years, long before the humans ever emitted anything into the air. So our view has always been that there has to be natural forces at work that drive these big, massive climate changes over the years when humans had absolutely no impact to them. And we presume those large forces remain in place today, and that the changes that are going on in our climate, which are perfectly normal, continue to be driven by these natural forces. And so what we have found is that what drives climate, what drives the Earth, is that the Earth's magnetic field, its atmosphere, interacts with the sun's magnetic field, the sun's solar radiation, and it interacts with the planets of our solar system. Now remember, every planet is spinning around the sun at a different rate, spinning around its axis at a different rate, and all these planets are moving around constantly, and these forces, which are gravimetric, magnetic, electric, are constantly altering how our atmosphere and the Earth's surface and the forces on our oceans are impacted. And so there's been thousands and thousands of papers from some brilliant physicists and nuclear physicists and mathematicians that have looked at all this. And what we try to do in this report, Casey, is come to what we have found over our entire life's work of what are the most important variables that really determine what's the trend going to be the trend in the natural climate change. And so the Gleesberg cycle, the Yoshimura cycle, are really planet orientations of Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus to the Earth. And where we are right now is that we're about to enter this period where all these planetary cycles are pointing to a significant cooling of our sea surface temperatures. If sea surface temperatures are falling, air temperature falls. The oceans decide what the air temperature is, not the other way around. So, for example, just think of this. El Nino, right? Warm Central Pacific sea surface temperatures. La Nina is cold Central Pacific sea surface temperature. Well, how does that happen, right? Well, because the sun and the planets modulate El Nino and La Nina, when those planetary gravimetric forces get just right, it's called upwelling. You get the upwelling. There's always cold air in the ocean, always a cold water in the ocean below. And when you get the upwelling, that cold air comes to the surface, displaces the warm air, warms the warm ocean, and you get La Nina. And that's why temperatures always plummet during La Nina. So this is all interactive and it's been going on, and it's verified. We went back in all the cycles we discussed, went back for 1,000 years and verified that these cycles have been working every single century, going far back as we can get this data and analyze the data. And where we are right now is all these cycles are pointing towards a significant cooling of our sea surface temperatures, which by definition means a significant cooling of our air temperatures. And it just so happens that that's synchronous with the sun going quiet. And that means weather volatility expansion, longer winters, shorter growing cycles, more extremity in weather volatility. And all of that is really expected to heat up when the La Nina kicks in 21-22. As you know, Casey, we've been talking about the year 21-22 on your program for a long time, that's where the big La Nina comes in a grand solar with these planetary forces. And it'll be the first real example of what this new weather regime of global cooling is really all about. And once we get through that, we think the entire discussion will shift to what's really going on and how we really, as a global ag sector, have to adjust, adapt, and indoctrinate new technologies to be able to grow food in this environment. So we really think it's something that most people need to be considering. And certainly, it's a contrarian point of view, as you know, Casey, where most of the discussion in at least the public forum suggests everything opposite. But we're very confident that we're going to see this take place, and that we hope that those that read this report or look at this information it will stimulate them to look at it for themselves and try to find what the truth is about everything. Because we know, unfortunately, the media does not necessarily have an interest in the truth. And our job is to make sure we get the truth out there, because to us, that will help us and our customers have better price forecasting and be able to better handle the pricing ahead for their businesses. So.
Yep, I can't believe you don't think the media doesn't want to is not out telling the entire story. I don't know where you're getting that from.
Just speculation.
Oh yeah.
What I really want to bring home, Casey, is that I have no axe to grind here. I don't really care what the truth is. I really don't. If the truth was that humans had a huge impact and emissions in the air really mattered, I would say so. I don't care what the truth is. I just want to know what the truth is, because it's going to help me do better price forecasting and help my customers better manage the period ahead. And everything that I see says what I've said, not only in this last report, but in the weather report that I put out December 2nd, and in your programs that we've done on just the solar cycle. This is what's coming. It's repeated. It's happened before. It's happening again. Every cycle is a little different, but there's nothing going on that history hasn't already told us what to look for if we're willing to look for it.
Right.
And so anyway, we think it's important. And the good news is that you don't have to wait 20 years to see if I'm right. The next couple of years, I made a big claim as to what I believe is going to take place in the winter of 21-22. And if somehow that winter does not turn out to be what I've been portraying, then I'd have to rethink what I'm saying. So I you could put me right on the spot, and if 21-22 winter isn't what I believe it to be, then I've missed something. But if it is, and I'm pretty comfortable it will be, the game is on. The game is on with everything that we're saying, and then you really have to start rapidly adjusting to your future agricultural business plans. So.
Yeah, well, you're not the only one out there saying that. So if you go out there and you do some research on, there's several physicists all over the place that are talking about these things, and they go back to, which your report talks about quite a bit, the Mulder and Dalton minimums that were of epic failures, crop failures around the world when those took place. I mean, I remember learning about that Dalton minimum when I was in high school or college, one of the two. I don't remember when it was, but it was a history class, and they were talking about the summer that had that never came or whatever. I can't remember what the exact thing was, but it was
the year without a summer in 18,
yeah,
15 or 18, 16, something like that.
Yep.
That was the Dalton minimum.
Yep.
That was a Dalton minimum.
In mini ice age that they kept tossing around.
Snow in late June in Iowa, by the way. Snow.
Failures of all the grapes in France. They had to get grapes from other places to make wine. So, I mean, this isn't made up. This isn't some joke. There's plenty of stuff out there, and there's a Russian physicist, and I can't remember her name. It escapes me right now. That has brought it up and talks about it quite a bit, and is very much in the same camp that you are. So,
I mean, Casey, I have thousands of peer-reviewed published papers by multiple PhD physicists and mathematicians and that have gone over this whole thing, over the last 50, 100 years. I mean, there's tons of research about the validity of these cycles, but somehow it's just not being brought to the surface. It's being, for whatever reason, being suppressed, and whether it's so complicated when you really look at all the variables at work, to say that you can bring the entire climate's effects to one variable and say everything's because of this one variable like CO2. It's, in my personal view, I'm a chemist by trade. I mean, that's my degree. It's the most obnoxious abuse of the scientific process I've ever seen, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Because the scientific process is you don't do that. You look at the body of evidence. The science is never settled. You're always learning something new. And we know throughout history, preconceived notions where scientists all believed the world was flat, realized it was not. And then, and as time goes on, you realize, that science is never settled, and you have to keep an open mind to the body of evidence, not, well, one variable is the reason for everything. Well, of course it's not.
Right.
It's like, good, if you drink orange juice, you're going to be totally healthy. No, orange juice will provide potential for you being healthier. Right. But if you eat at McDonald's every day, you're not going to be healthy.
No, that's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, no. So there's some really, really, really good information here, as always, when you put these reports out. But there's a significant amount of good scientific data that backs up all that you've been talking about on here, and I'm right there with you on all this. For
this particular report, we really, we spent a lot of time on that. If any of your listeners would want to see that, just to get a copy of it, I have no problem emailing that report that we just issued yesterday to them. It's so important that I'll be willing to just give it to them for their perusal. It's just too important not to. I mean, that's a follow-on to the first report, but it's really, really something we spent tons of time on, and we think it's a template for going forward, and it's something we're going to keep modulating as we go forward to what we think is going to happen here.
Right on. So, well, that's a good place to tell everybody how to find this report and get a hold of you to get this information.
I think, if they want to get the report, the best thing you can do, Casey, is just email me at Shawn, SHAWN, at Hackett, HACKETT, advisors.com. Just email me, say that you heard, through Moving Iron, you want the weather report, and we'll get it right out to them. So.
Good stuff, man. That's good stuff. All right, Shawn, what else is out there that you think we should cover today? I think we've kind of hit the high points, but I think there's anything that that's on your mind right now that we make sure people need to know about.
The only thing these are things we've talked about before, but I think it's worth mentioning one last time. The next wave of the desert locust, the summer hatching, the summer egg laying that took place, all that hatching is going to take place right about now. It is expected to be diametrically larger than the swarm that took place from the spring into the early summer. And so we'd be watching for this summer swarm in August in India and see if that has the kind of impact we think it may have. So we'd be watching that. The second thing is that these historic floods that are taking place in China and continue to take place in China, we want to be on the lookout for whether or not that Three Gorges dam actually breaks or not. Because if it were to break, there's already been tremendous damage as it is, Casey, but if it were to break, it would actually create a failed rice crop because the main rice crop is grown to the south of that. We'd really keep an eye on that because we do know the Chinese have been buying a lot of U.S. grain and ag just in the last couple of weeks, and we think this flood might have something to do with it. So we would really keep an eye on how that plays out. And lastly, we would keep an eye on the fall armyworm impacts to the corn crop in the northeastern part of China. All this moisture only intensifies the reproductive cycle of these insects, and we think it could be a big impact. And maybe it's the reason why the corn price in China has gone up parabolically the last 2 to 3 weeks. In fact, we're looking at one of the largest price differentials to U.S. prices in 25 years. So something's going on there with China about something that's really becoming dire for them. And even though the market is, crop ratings are good, it's all bearish, there could be a big slingshot here as we move into the fall. And we just want everyone to be mindful that markets out of nowhere could come alive because for whatever reason, the markets tend to ignore news until it's right upon you and they slaps you in the head. So that's what continues to be something we're trying to monitor. Plus the hurricane season.
Right.
Hurricane season is just getting started. We've talked about it: cotton, rice, orange juice. We think it's going to be an active season, and there could be some significant price upward adjustments in those areas where we expect the hurricane season to be really active. So nothing really new other than we're now right on top of when those variables should have an impact on the markets over the next couple of months.
Yep.
So.
Plenty of good news coming out of China. Can't get enough of that place.
Yeah, they're just. Well, if you really think about it, the virus, the African swine fever, historic floods. They're not having a good year.
No, they're struggling. They're having a rough day. Rough day at the office, for sure.
Sure are.
All right.
Sure are.
All right, Shawn. Well, thanks for being on the podcast, man. One more time with where they can get that report and how they get a hold of you.
Email me at Shawn, SHAWN, at Hackett, HACKETT, advisors.com. Just mention Moving Iron Podcast, weather report. We'll get it right out to them. I think they'll find it extremely helpful and maybe stimulate them for further research.
Yeah, absolutely. Email and get that report. Like I said, I read the executive summary in the front and kind of got a good gist of what it was, and I'm going to dive into the meat and potatoes of the actual report here as soon as we're done here. So, Shawn, thanks for being on the podcast. I'm Casey Seymour with Moving Iron Podcast. Make sure you check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's where you'll find the latest editions of the Moving Iron Podcast. Also, check out movingironllc.com for all the latest news, as well as the Moving Iron Podcast and all blogs that I write get posted there as well. Make sure you check out the Global Ag Network and the great podcasters there. And I guess with that, I'm Casey Seymour, Shawn Hackett. Let's go move some iron, folks. Out.
Moving iron in the 21st century. Hard-working people working hard for you and me. Moving iron, time and time again. Through the years, you'll find us here.